as you can tell from the way we are jumping around in your notebook, kind of moving along different tracks at the same time, as the notes are going to be ahead of us, at least for a while, in terms of where we are working when you're doing independent work. We still have work to do on the Columbian Exchange. After we conclude part 2, we're going to start talking about the harms and benefits to the Old World and the New World, ultimately with the goal of being able to make an argument about who is the winner and who is the loser, relatively speaking, in the Columbian Exchange, the Old World or the New World. We are also going to be looking at some explorers individually. At the same time, we're also going to look at how the exchange and exploration got us to empire beyond. And our starting point in this map that is animated is 1492. And by 1550, we can see that the Spanish and the Portuguese have colonies in the New World. The Portuguese have a presence along Africa, around Asia. You see things change. The Dutch get into the mix, and the British and the French. Now, at this point, we are past our current time period, so we're going to move on. As we think about these, you need to understand that an empire is a group of territories, often very different, often in very different parts of the world, but all of them are under the control of one higher authority. Often this is referred to as a metropole or a mother country. And I've had some students, it kind of seems puzzling because an empire also sounds like it could describe the 50 United States. There's a collection of territories, 50 states, and they're all under the ultimate authority of a federal government in Washington, D.C. So one of the things that makes us different from an empire is the 50 states are all part of the United States, whose government is in Washington, D.C. Whereas in a colony, you might be under control of a government and a state, but you don't actually belong to that country. And we have things that fit as colonies, even if we are thinking about the United States. Before World War II, the Philippines was a colony of the United States. The Philippines are here. And they were under the control of the United States. They were under control of the government in Washington, D.C., but they were not part of the United States. Okay? And unlike the states that make up the U.S., they did not have the same influence over the government that controlled them, which should start triggering in your minds thoughts about the American patriots and their protests against taxation with representation when America was a colony of Great Britain. So same kind of idea. And that's what makes an empire different from, say, a country. The empires we are going to be looking at, and we will look at them in this order: the Portuguese, the Spanish. Of course, we start off with them because, remember, they were our first movers in the age of exploration. We will then look at the Dutch. And I know when we think about empires, we probably don't really think about the Dutch. Chances are you guys don't really think about the Dutch for any reason at any time. But the Dutch actually are kind of one of the more interesting stories of empire building in this era. You will also see them referred to as the Netherlands, which makes thinking about and talking about the Dutch a little confusing. Then we will look at the English, who will later become the British. just to keep things confusing. Actually, the Brits didn't do that on purpose. Politics just changed in the British Isles. Then the final empire we will consider will be the French. When we talk about the Portuguese Empire, we're talking about three areas. The African area, around the west, on down around the Cape of Good Hope in the south, and up the east towards the Horn of Africa, as well as Madagascar. Second is Asia, and there's going to be some connection with parts of Africa and the Asian empires of the Portuguese that kind of make them different in the same way from the third area. Right? And so the third area we should think of as really distinct, and that is the American part of the Portuguese Empire. And one of the things to notice is in the African and Asian parts, for the most of the time, the Portuguese colonies and territory don't go very far in from the coasts. Angola here is an exception, and Angola is going to be an exception for the Portuguese the whole time. They don't give it up, I think, until 1975, I want to say. And there was a reason for that. Angola has oil and it has diamonds, and that makes it a valuable place to control. But otherwise, they stick to the coasts. But the American empire is different, where they control a large piece of territory. Right? And they definitely go inland. Because Africa and Asia have a lot of connections and similarities, we're going to talk about them together. One of the things that unites them is that in both places, the Portuguese had to defeat the Muslims in order to establish control. And what they are taking control of especially is the spice trade. This is that gold motive. If you'll fill out your pass. No, you're going to have to be able to fill out your pass because I can't do that right now. Remember, in that gold motive, spices are the source of wealth. It's not actual gold in the beginning that the Muslims and the Italians control, that the Portuguese and the Spanish want. Remember, they've got the monopoly on it, and they have had for a long time. Now, another part of this are going to be the control of two straits. And if that looks like an incorrect spelling of straits, it's because it's not that kind of strait. The only strait we've really talked to this point has been the Strait of Gibraltar. But that helps us understand what a strait is. A strait is a narrow strip of water separating two areas of land. The Strait of Hormuz is here, and the Strait of Malacca is there. Now, both of these and all of these areas here follow the line that we previously saw in maps of the Muslim spice trade. Okay. And those little dots that you're seeing are trading posts. And that's really how the Portuguese operated. And in this part of the world, that's the way Europeans are going to operate for quite a while in this era of globalization. They can't control large pieces of territory inland. They can control little bits along the coast, and that's it. So they mostly deal with people who do live farther inland and who will trade with them for the things that they want. Why are these straits worth mentioning? Those straits were important then, and they are still very important now. To help make sense of that, try and get this thing onto the screen. And what you can see on this map are, in some cases, dots, and in some cases, what look like strings, some places thick lines, and in some places blobs. Whether you're seeing blobs, thick lines, thin lines, or just dots, each of those dots represents a ship that is on the ocean at a given time. So there are countless ships moving all the time. This lets us see where the major trade routes are. And a lot of it's still the same. The Portuguese had Macau up here. One of those lines still runs up there to make contact with China. Also now Japan. And down here too, what were colonies in Indonesia. The fact that it's so bright there and the lines are so thick tells us that that is a huge amount of trade. And it all makes this turn here going through the Strait of Malacca, where it goes around India, follows the coastline here, just like the spice trade, and goes through the Strait of Hormuz here. And the reason that this whole area in the Persian Gulf looks like a giant blob is because it's full of ships all the time. Lots of it is oil tankers, taking oil from Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, closer in there, Kuwait, which is really hard to see on here, and out. We also have the line that comes over here, heads up the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, into the Mediterranean, where it goes different places, and maybe out into Europe and across to here. Those straits are crucial. They were targeted for pirates because of the value that went through them in the past, and there are still pirates causing trouble in the Straits of Malacca just because there is so much potential to steal. Still pirates. The pirates that were more famous when you guys were like at the oldest tots were the Somali pirates off of here, who like hijacked ships. There was the movie, what was that? Captain Phillips. Wasn't that the name of the movie? Yeah, there was a ship that was taken over. I don't think it was actually, well, maybe. Anyway, the captain was an American, and the Somali pirates took over, and then, what was it? They used Navy SEALs to take it back. So, I mean, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, it was happening then. That's kind of been shut down, sort of. But I mean, if you just go right up here to the entrance to the Red Sea, you've recently had Houthis essentially acting like pirates, except instead of stealing things, they're just using drones to blow stuff up. So yeah, Drake. I mean, still pirates. As if you as a small child always wanted to be a pirate, you still can. Right? Like, I don't encourage you to break international law, and like everybody hates pirates so much. If you are a pirate, like basically anybody can attack you because you are you are a criminal against humanity is how international law sees pirates. But yeah, you could still be a pirate. YouTube's been doing some kind of weird things. We'll see how it goes. Here is it's a bit older, but it still explains how the Strait of Hormuz still matters today. I think there's unfortunately a fair chance that you are going to see the Strait of Hormuz in the headlines in the coming days, because it looks like, I said YouTube is playing nice today. Iran is making big rumblings like they are going to attack Israel. And if they attack Israel, then it's possible countries like the United States and Britain will attack Iran, and then Iran could make good on its threat to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. And this video kind of explains why that matters. Now, looking at that third area of empire, as I mentioned, the Americas are different. Portugal's colonial possessions in the Americas essentially really overlap with current Brazil, and that's why Brazil is kind of the standout in Latin America as a Portuguese-speaking country rather than a Spanish-speaking country. So we defined empires, and empires are made up of colonies. Colonies are a territory, a chunk of land, often the chunk of land that comes along with some coastline and some ocean, that is controlled by another country, but not part of that country. And Brazil is not considered a province of Portugal. Just like the American colonies were not considered provinces of Britain. Right? We were colonies. And a lot of times these territories are far away from the country that controls them. I mean, that was certainly true for the British Empire, because the Brits liked to boast that their empire was so big that the sun never set on it. There was always some part of the British Empire in daylight. At the same time that it's far away, it is an essential part of the definition of a colony that at least some people from the controlling country, whether you call that the mother country, the imperial power, the metropole, whatever, at least some of the people from that controlling country have to occupy the colony and run things. Often it's a very small number, especially in this early era of empire. You can't send that many Europeans over to run things. Here, we are focusing on that gold motive, the wealth motive, but it's different here. Instead of it being about controlling trade in spices, it is about producing sugar. We've already defined cash crop when we were working on Columbian Exchange Part 2. But so that we have it in our notes, cash crop is a crop you grow to sell for money rather than a crop that you grow to consume and feed yourself and your family. Or maybe your livestock so that they can feed your family. And of course, unlike tobacco, which was the example we focused on before, you can eat sugar. I know you guys know that. You eat sugar every day. But if you tried to just subsist on sugar, not only would your dentist be very upset with you, but you would also die. It would probably take longer, but sugar, although being very dense in calories, doesn't have a lot of the other stuff you need to live. So you grow sugar not to eat, but primarily to sell. Later on, the Portuguese will also discover gold, and that's not going to be until the 1700s or 18th century. Two different ways of saying the same thing. But later they will find gold and, of course, be very interested in mining that and extracting it for the wealth of Portugal. Gold mining in the Americas and sugar production especially, was brutal work under really hot and humid, miserable conditions, and it relied on slave labor. At first, the Portuguese, and we'll see this is kind of the same pattern with the Spanish, rely on enslaved natives. But this doesn't work. For one thing, European diseases have killed so many of the natives that there aren't a lot left. And some of the ones that aren't left, things have been so bad that they're really not in good health to be used as slaves, especially under the brutal conditions of gold mining and sugarcane production. And so the Portuguese will switch from enslaving the indigenous people to importing enslaved Africans to work in the sugarcane and gold mining ventures. Africans have already been exposed to those diseases brought over by the Europeans. Those diseases had traveled back and forth in the old world. So diseases that the Europeans had also largely been had by populations in Africa. And that is where we are going to stop with our notes today. What you have in the remaining time, it's not exactly called an exit slip,